What is going on, everybody? It's your boy John, and welcome back to Gearbox. So today we've got a special video for you, but before we get into it, I want to give a little bit of background on where I'm coming from. So recently, my buddy, a good friend of mine, has taken his first step in his aviation journey. He and I go back, let's call it 9 years, played college football together. And one of the many things that we've always bonded over was aviation. You know, I had my license, he did not, but he always found aviation interesting and intriguing in a lot of ways. And what's interesting about that is, you know, in my experience, you have kind of three types of people. People that don't care about aviation and couldn't care less. You've got people that are intrigued by aviation but would never do anything about it. Like they'll just, I don't know, kind of see a plane fly over and be like, oh, that's cool, but whatever. And then there's the third type. That are the people that are enamored by aviation and will eventually get their license and so on and so forth. My buddy falls into that number 3 category. So while we're in the locker room, while we're hanging out on the weekends, doing what college kids do, always got on the aviation topic, and I told him, like, dude, just go ahead and do it. Well, the other day he gave me a call and said that, he took his first step into his aviation, career, and I'm super pumped for him. And as we were, talking and stuff, I wanted to give him some advice on kind of what that process looks like and some important things to keep in mind when it comes to getting your private pilot's license. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. So as always, we're going to be doing a top 5 list here. I hope you enjoy, but without further ado, let's get into number 1. So the first entry on this list is please take a discovery flight. This is important for a couple different reasons. One, discovery flights are awesome. So for those who are unaware, discovery flight is when you will go into, let's call it your local flight school. You'll go up with your instructor, and basically they're going to take you on a scenic flight of the area. So around here, we might go up by the mountains, get a look at all that fun stuff, especially here in the fall. Then we might go back over to Clemson, look at the football stadium, go over the lakes, and then we'll come back. Now, this is a very important flight for a couple reasons. One is you're getting your first experience with your instructor. Feel them out. You'll pretty quickly, in my opinion, figure out if they're going to be a good fit for you or not. But this is also very important for you as the individual who's pursuing aviation. If you get motion sick or you don't like the feeling of flight for one reason or another, you're going to learn on this discovery flight, and you're going to weed yourself out pretty quick if it's not for you. If you get out of that flight and you say, I want to go back up, the feeling of leaving the ground is as intoxicating as anything else, I'd say you're good to go and move on to the rest of the steps in this list. But number 1 is going to be get a discovery flight. For the second entry on this list, and we've kind of already talked about it a little bit, but research your flight school and subsequently research your instructor. This one's really important, especially on the flight school side of things. There are a couple different flavors of flight schools, right? You've got your little kind of mom and pop outfit with couple old dudes that are out there with their CFI and just like to fly for shits and gigs, but also teaching, other folks how to fly. And then there's, on the other end of the spectrum, there's like an ATP. ATP is basically going to push you through private, instrument, multi-engine, commercial, all of the ratings you could possibly want with the end goal of going to fly for Delta or whatever. Depending on what your end goal in aviation is, choose wisely. I've done all of my training at more or less mom and pop stuff, and I've loved it. The pace is different, the overall vibes are different, and I think it's important to distinguish that. But on a similar vein here, you need to look at your instructor as well. It takes all types of people to make the world go round, and the same thing applies in the aviation community. You want to make sure that not only is your instructor a good person and someone that you would get along with, but also feeling out what their teaching style is like. Envision yourself flying with them and you guys hit a road bump and some maneuver for whatever reason is not clicking in your head. How are they going to react to that, and how are they going to then fix, your mistake or whatever? That's really, really important. I've flown with, I don't know, let's call it 10 CFIs at this point, which is not a bunch, but it's not a few either. I can honestly say my instrument CFI was the best instructor I've had. He and I are probably more or less the same age, same stages in life. And with your instrument, you're doing a lot of cross-country flying, a lot of just sitting there, hanging out, talking about life, talking about work, talking about pretty much anything except for aviation. And it's just going to make that experience that much more enjoyable. So all of that being said, do your research. Do not put yourself in a not so fun situation. You want to make this as fun and effective as it possibly can be. So do your research. For the third entry on this list, we're talking about flying consistently. And what I mean by that is not necessarily how you fly and how your flights go, although that's, an end goal as well. But from a scheduling perspective, fly consistently. This is super important in any facet of aviation, whether you're pursuing private pilot, instrument, getting a type rating, whatever. You need to be able to fly consistently to continue building on your core foundational knowledge on that plane or on that type. But this is especially important in private. And the reason being is for instrument or for a type rating or for tail wheel or whatever, it's just little nuances that have changed at that point. It's not a massive new concept necessarily. Private pilot, on the other hand, you are learning to fly. Like, you are learning how to do the core concept of what all the rest of aviation is built on. And the only way you're going to do that is by flying consistently, having good flights, having bad flights, learning from your mistakes, and the next time you go up, you're able to build on that. A great example of this is crosswind landings. When you first start off flying, odds are you're not going to go up flying in a crosswind component of more than like 3 knots. It's going to be straight down the pipe. Landings are easy, and there's not a whole lot of thought to it, really, other than stay on your airspeed, flare at the end type of deal. Don't crash the nose wheel into the asphalt or anything like that, but it's pretty standard. Now you move up to crosswind, and now you have a kind of dancing between rudder input, aileron input, stay on airspeed. At this point, we're slipping the airplane. There's a lot of, moving parts here, and at first it can be really intimidating. But not only intimidating, it's something that, at that point you don't have the muscle memory to say, all right, I've got a crosswind coming from here. Let me give right rudder and left aileron. It's just you have to think about it too much to then do the inputs. Whereas if you're flying consistently and that crosswind component is slowly increasing and you're getting more comfortable with that, it's going to become second nature. Same thing with stall recovery or slow flight or steep turns or whatever. There's a lot of those things that if you're not flying consistently, you're going to forget some of that knowledge and have to relearn that on your next flight, which at the end of the day, what that means is you're spending more money. So fly consistently, make it a priority to you, and I promise you it'll pay off literally in the long run. For the fourth entry on this list, I want every CFI who's watching this video to give this a like and or a comment, because I know I'm, preaching what you got to preach, my friends. Number 4 is knock out your written early. For those who might be unaware, to get your private pilot's license, there are really two, but three components as far as getting things to a point where you can call yourself a private pilot outside of like hours and cross-country flights and that type of stuff. You have a written test, you have an oral exam, and you have a check ride. Now, the written test is kind of separate from the oral and the check ride. Those are done on the same day. But anyway, your written test is the foundation of your knowledge of your private pilot's license. I believe there are some stipulations on when you can take the written, but ultimately you can take it pretty freaking early. So if I were you, and I did not do this, but my instrument taught me this, start studying as early as you possibly can. Once you feel ready, and once your CFI thinks that you are ready, you will then take the written. And once you pass that, you have now given yourself a baseline of knowledge. At that point, you can start applying that knowledge to your flights every single day. Whether we're talking weather, whether we're talking legal stuff, whether we're talking aerodynamics, all of that is important in your private pilot, but you don't know it's important until you study and you take your written, right? Another thing with taking your written early is the last thing that you want to do is, let's say your check ride is on November 31st or 22nd, whatever. If your written is scheduled a week before that and you don't pass, getting that rescheduled and putting that extra stress on yourself to knock out your written, to knock out your check ride, all that sort of stuff is going to be a disaster. Get it knocked out early and you'll thank me later, and then you can focus on flying and fine-tuning your flying for purposes of the check ride and that type of stuff. This one's important. I feel like this one gets overlooked all the time, so don't be a part of that group of people that does that. Knock out your written. To wrap up the video, guys, for the 5th and final entry into this list, arguably this one is the most important for certain purposes. I'll get into that in a second. The 5th entry in this list is enjoy the process. The reason I said kind of a caveat there, especially enjoy the process if this is just going to be a hobby. If your end goal is to go to the airlines and aviation is your career, I understand there's going to be a little more pressure on you to do well and knock everything out in a timely manner. But for us hobbyists, weekend warrior pilots, enjoy the process. This is a hobby. There's nothing riding on this other than feeling really cool when you tell people you're a pilot. Like, that's it. And maybe a couple cool trips that you do flying yourself. What I've noticed a lot, and I've suffered from this as well, aviation is incredibly cool, but it's also incredibly stressful. There's a ton of knowledge that's getting thrown your way, a ton of concepts that, normal people don't have, right? Driving a car compared to flying is wildly different. Like, there's another axis that we're dealing with in a plane, along with physics and all that type of shit that we probably glazed over in high school going over, but maybe that was just me. But long story short, it can be taxing physically, mentally, emotionally. Enjoy it. There's so many different experiences that we get in general aviation, especially, from the emotional side of private pilot. Great example of that, first solo. Just think of where you started and, your first landing that you bounced 1,000 times or whatever. And then you're solo and you grease that first landing and you have that light bulb moment to say, I actually know what I'm doing. Being able to reflect on the process of getting from where you started to where you are now is incredibly satisfying. And that goes for anything. I had a million light bulb moments in instrument. It's just a really cool thing, and it is challenging. And so when you accomplish, whether it's a small accomplishment or a large accomplishment within your private pilot, pat yourself on the back. That's pretty cool. You just knocked out your solo cross country. That's awesome. Don't get bogged down by a bad flight or bad landing or, oh my God, the weather's been shit the past 3 times I was scheduled to fly. I'm never going to get this thing done. As much as all of that sucks, the end goal is pretty cool. So don't lose sight of that and enjoy the idea of getting your private pilot's license. I promise you that's going to help you out in the long run. Ask me how I know. So anyway, guys, that's going to do it for another episode of Gearbox. If you like this video, please give it a big fat thumbs up. If you have any questions on your private pilot, if you have anything that I've missed in my list, drop them in the comment section down below, guys. And as always, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell. You know the drill. And until next time, peace.